What really happened behind a single sentence that sounded so simple, yet managed to silence an entire room, halt the breath of millions of fans, and spark a wave of unstoppable speculation across the world? Why, when Jungkook's recording suddenly went viral, did it become Taehyung's one line that stole all the attention? Not the video itself. Was this merely coincidence? Or is there something that has long been hidden beneath their bond that is finally beginning to surface? It all began with a short clip that, at first glance, seemed no different from the countless pieces of content circulating on social media. The duration was brief, the quality imperfect, and the atmosphere appeared casual, nothing that immediately raised suspicion. But as with many defining moments in the digital age, it was precisely that simplicity that ignited the explosion. Within hours, the video spread across platforms, amassing millions of views, dissected frame by fans determined to uncover something that might escape the casual eye. Amid the noise of analysis and speculation, one moment stood out, impossible to ignore. A fragment of audio nearly drowned out by background noise, yet clear enough to trigger a storm of questions. It was Taehyung's voice. The sentence was short, but its impact? Unmistakable. What exactly are you doing? On the surface it sounded ordinary, almost casual, but the tone, that was what changed everything. There was something in it, something difficult to define. It wasn't just a simple question, not just the playful teasing they were known for. There was weight. There was restrained emotion. There was something that made anyone who heard it feel that this was not a moment meant for public consumption. And that was when everything began to feel different. Fans who had initially watched the clip for entertainment began replaying it over and over again. They slowed it down, amplified the sound, and used various tools to confirm what they thought they had heard. Was that really Taehyung's voice? Was the tone truly as heavy as it felt? Or was it simply an illusion shaped by expectation and emotion? But one thing could not be denied. The reaction that followed that sentence was far more suspicious. Jungkook, who had appeared relaxed and even slightly smiling just moments before, suddenly changed. His expression froze. His gaze shifted. There was a pause, too long to be dismissed as coincidence. And most striking of all, the camera moved away, as if someone deliberately tried to redirect attention. Why? That question became the starting point of an even larger wave of speculation. Was there something they didn't want to show? Did that sentence carry a deeper meaning than it seemed? And perhaps most unsettling of all, was this the first time the public had glimpsed a side of their relationship that had always been hidden? Some fans began connecting this moment to past incidents. Brief glances on stage, awkward pauses during interviews, jokes that felt slightly forced. All those small fragments, once dismissed as insignificant, now seemed to form a pattern too strong to ignore. And then came the bolder theories. What if that sentence wasn't just a spontaneous reaction? What if it was the culmination of something that had been building for a long time? An emotion that could no longer be contained, even in front of a camera? Of course, not everyone agreed with this interpretation. Some argued that it was simply overanalysis, that fans were reading too deeply into something that wasn't there. They pointed out that as public figures, every movement and word of idols is constantly scrutinized, making it easy for small details to appear more significant than they truly are. But that argument began to weaken when another recording surfaced. Additional footage, captured from a different angle. Clips that showed the moments before and after the sentence was spoken. And most striking of all, the reactions of those around them. In that footage, the shift in atmosphere was undeniable. The laughter that once filled the space slowly faded. Some staff members exchanged glances. A few tried to smile, but the expression never reached their eyes. And in the middle of it all, Taehyung looked different. His gaze was not the one fans were used to. Gone was the signature smile that had captivated millions. Instead, there was an expression that defied easy explanation, a mix of concern, disappointment, and something deeper. Was this coincidence? Or was this a rare moment where the carefully maintained facade began to crack? As time passed, discussion surrounding the incident intensified. Online forums filled with long analyses, Reaction videos flooded every platform. Every detail, no matter how small, was examined relentlessly. Even the way Taehyung inhaled before speaking became a topic of debate. Yet amidst all of this, one question lingered in the air. Why was there no clarification? No official statement? No explanation? No attempt to calm the growing speculation? On the contrary, the silence itself seemed to fuel the curiosity. And perhaps that was the most unsettling part of all. Because in a world where rumors are often addressed swiftly, silence can mean many things. Could mean there is nothing to explain. But it could also mean there is something that cannot be explained. A few days after the video went viral, another moment emerged, one that further complicated the narrative. During a public appearance, the interaction between Taehyung and Jungkook felt different. Nothing overtly dramatic, yet for those who had followed them for years, the shift was undeniable. A slightly greater distance, shorter eye contact, and most noticeably, the absence of the small familiar gestures that had once defined them. Was this merely coincidence? Or was it the aftermath of something that had occurred behind the scenes? Questions continued to multiply, yet answers remained elusive. And therein lies the power of this story. The uncertainty that refuses to let anyone look away. Because in the end, this is not just about a single sentence, not just about a viral clip. It is about how a fleeting moment can open the door to something far greater. Something that may have long been hidden behind smiles, behind cameras, behind carefully constructed images. And as the days turned into weeks, the silence surrounding that moment did not fade. It deepened. What should have been just another fleeting viral clip refused to disappear. Instead, it evolved, taking on new layers of meaning as more people revisited it, reinterpreted it, and perhaps most dangerously, began to believe there was something hidden beneath its surface that had yet to be uncovered. Why did no one step forward to clarify? Why did the agency remain quiet, even as the speculation grew louder and more intense with each passing hour? In an industry where even the smallest misunderstandings are often addressed with carefully crafted statements, this absence of explanation felt deliberate. And that single detail alone was enough to ignite an entirely new wave of curiosity. Some began to ask a more unsettling question. What if the silence wasn't an oversight? What if it was intentional? Because silence, in moments like these, can speak louder than any words ever could. The narrative quickly shifted from analyzing a single sentence to questioning everything that surrounded it. Old interviews were revisited. Past interactions were re-examined under a new lens. Even moments that had once been seen as playful or insignificant were now dissected with a level of scrutiny that bordered on obsession. It was as if fans and observers alike were trying to reconstruct a puzzle, one that no one was even sure existed before this incident. And then came the interpretations. Some believed that Taehyung's tone carried concern, suggesting that his words were not rooted in frustration, but in worry, an instinctive reaction to something that had caught him off guard. Others, however, insisted that there was tension in his voice, something sharper, something that hinted at unresolved emotions beneath the surface. The same sentence, the same tone, yet two completely different realities depending on who was listening. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of all was Jungkook's reaction. Because while words can be misheard, tones can be misinterpreted, reactions are often far more difficult to fabricate. And in that brief moment captured on camera, Jungkook's shift was undeniable. It wasn't dramatic, not in a way that would immediately alarm a casual viewer. But for those who had spent years watching his expressions, learning the subtle language of his gestures, it was enough to raise a question that refused to be ignored. What did he understand in that moment that the audience did not? There was a hesitation, a fraction of a second where his usual composure seemed to falter. His eyes flickered, his posture adjusted, and then almost as quickly as it had appeared, the moment was gone, replaced by something more controlled, more neutral. But not before it had been captured, replayed, and immortalized by millions of viewers across the globe. And just like that, a new theory emerged. What if the real story wasn't in what was said, but in what wasn't? Because sometimes the most revealing truths are hidden not in words, but in the spaces between them, in the pauses, in the glances, in the things left unsaid. As discussions intensified, another layer began to unfold, one that extended beyond the two individuals at the center of the moment. Observers began to notice the reactions of those in the background. Staff members, camera operators, individuals who were not meant to be the focus of attention, yet whose subtle movements added a new dimension to the narrative. A glance exchanged too quickly, a smile that faded too soon, a shift in body language that suggested awareness of something the audience was not meant to notice. Could it all be coincidence? Perhaps. But when moments like these begin to align, coincidence starts to feel like an increasingly fragile explanation. The online world responded in the only way it knew how, by amplifying everything. Edits of the video appeared with dramatic music layered beneath the audio. Side-by-side comparisons of past and present interactions flooded timelines. Even those who had initially dismissed the situation as overblown found themselves drawn back in, if only to understand why it had captured so much attention in the first place. And that is the nature of moments like this, they pull you in whether you want them to or not. Yet beneath all the noise, all the speculation, all the theories that ranged from plausible to wildly imaginative, there remained a core truth that no one could escape. No one actually knew what had happened. Not really. Because what the world saw was only a fragment, a brief glimpse into a moment that existed within a much larger context. A context that remained hidden, inaccessible, known only to those who had been present when it happened. And still, that didn't stop anyone from trying to fill in the gaps. Some narratives painted the moment as a turning point, suggesting that it marked a shift in dynamics that would eventually become more visible over time. Others argued the opposite, that it was nothing more than a fleeting misunderstanding, magnified beyond recognition by the relentless nature of online attention. But if that were true, why did it still feel unresolved? Why did the clip continue to resurface, even as newer content emerged to take its place? Why did people keep coming back to it, searching for something they couldn't quite define? Perhaps the answer lies not in the clip itself, but in what it represents. Because in an industry built on carefully curated images, moments of perceived authenticity carry a weight that is difficult to ignore. They feel real, unfiltered, and because of that, they invite a level of emotional investment that goes far beyond ordinary content. This was not just a video anymore. It had become a question about truth, about perception, about the invisible line between what is shown and what is hidden. And maybe, just maybe, that is why it continues to linger. Because deep down, everyone is asking the same thing, even if they don't say it out loud. What really happened in that moment? Was it simply a misinterpreted exchange, blown out of proportion by millions of curious eyes? Or was it something more? A brief crack in a carefully maintained reality, offering a glimpse into something that was never meant to be seen? There is no definitive answer. Not yet. And perhaps there never will be. But as long as that question remains unanswered, the moment will continue to live on, replayed, re-examined, reimagined. And just when it seemed like the conversation had reached its peak, something even more unexpected began to happen. The narrative started to shift from speculation into something far more introspective. People were no longer just asking what happened between them, but why moments like this feel so powerful in the first place. Why does a single sentence, spoken in an unguarded tone, carry the weight of something almost monumental? Why do millions of people feel compelled to search for meaning in a fragment of time that, in reality, may have been entirely ordinary? The answer perhaps lies in the nature of visibility itself. In a world where every gesture, every glance, and every word can be captured, replayed, and analyzed endlessly, the boundary between public and private becomes increasingly fragile. For figures constantly in the spotlight, even the smallest slip in tone or expression can take on a significance far beyond its original intent. And when that happens, reality begins to blur, not because something dramatic necessarily occurred, but because perception reshapes it into something that feels dramatic. This is where the moment becomes larger than the individuals involved. Because what people are reacting to is not just Taehyung's sentence or Jungkook's expression. It is the possibility that something real, something unfiltered, briefly surfaced in a space that is usually controlled. That possibility alone is enough to ignite imagination, to invite interpretation, to create narratives that extend far beyond what can actually be confirmed. And yet, there is a quiet contradiction at the heart of it all. The more people search for certainty, the more elusive it becomes. Every replay of the video offers a slightly different perspective. Every analysis introduces a new angle. Even those who are convinced they understand what happened often find themselves questioning their own conclusions after seeing someone else's interpretation. It becomes a loop, one that feeds on itself, growing more complex with each passing day. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of this entire phenomenon is not the clip, nor the sentence, nor even the reactions. It is the emotional response it evokes. Because beneath the theories and discussions, there is something undeniably human at work. A desire to understand, a need to connect, a tendency to look for meaning, even in places where there may be none. And in that sense, the moment transcends its original context entirely. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of how people interpret relationships, how they project emotions, how they fill in the blanks when information is incomplete. The uncertainty becomes a canvas, and everyone paints their own version of what they believe to be true. Some see concern, some see tension, some see nothing at all. And all of them, in their own way, are responding to the same thing.